thank you everyone for joining me for a really special video where I thought it would be interesting to hear from readers that experienced the Betsy-Tacy series for the first time as adults, which I was very pleased a couple of years ago in 2019 when I hosted a read along of the series with Katie from Life Between Words and Kelly from Books I'm Not Reading. And seeing people reading it for the first time as adults and still enjoying it, even though, some series you feel like you kind of, if you don't read it as a child, you'll miss out on it. So yeah, we'll just be chatting all things Betsy-Tacy. And I guess Katie, since you were the host of the 2019 read along, I guess how did you hear about Betsy-Tacy, the series, and what were kind of your expectations about it before you had actually read it?
Yeah, so I first heard about Betsy-Tacy long ago. So I went to college in Minnesota at a little liberal arts college called St. Olaf. And one of my friends there, she was a couple years younger than me. So I felt a lot older and wiser at the time, but now I know, like, I don't think of her as any younger than me. Anyway, she grew up loving Betsy-Tacy, as most young girls, I think, in Minnesota do, because it's sort of like their Anne of Green Gables. Like, they grow up, Minnesotan girls grow up with Betsy-Tacy and they love her. And so that's where I first heard about it, my friend Leslie. But I didn't pick it up then, and I don't know why, but I remember her telling me that she thought I would love it because I have always loved Anne of Green Gables, and I've talked about it, my love for Anne of Green Gables, since I was like 11 or 12. So my memory is that I talked with her about Anne of Green Gables, and she said, "Have you ever read Betsy-Tacy?" And I said, "I've never even heard of Betsy-Tacy." So that's how I first heard about it, but I didn't then read it until our read along 2 years ago.
Very cool. And then what kind of did you think it was going to be like, maybe in comparison to Anne of Green Gables or the Little House series or Little Women?
I think my expectations were that it would be most like Anne, because that is what people would compare it to when talking to me about why they why they thought I would like it, is because I love Anne. So they'd say, "I think you'd love Betsy-Tacy." But they'd always make a caveat. They'd say the first 4 books, they start out really young, and as the books age, Betsy gets older and they get more mature, and the writing gets more mature. So they'd always preface it with that. And so I think it's interesting that I don't want to like hog this introduction,
Okay,
but
you're fine.
I think it's interesting that you mentioned Laura Ingalls Wilder. I've never sort of made the comparison, but in some ways it's sort of like a mixture between the Laura Ingalls books and Anne of Green Gables, because the Laura Ingalls books, you age with Laura and it starts out really young when she's like 4 years old in the big woods. So yeah, in some ways it feels like that, but it feels like Anne in context, like small town, lovable town characters, that kind of thing.
Yeah, even though Anne starts out with a much harder life than Betsy, their life as, the ages that you're seeing them in the books feel fairly similar. And yeah, I guess, that caveat that people give, because I think I'm always worried people will be underwhelmed by the beginning of the series, because it is like, I feel like a 10-year-old could really, or even a little bit younger could easily read them. And so kind of, don't worry, because Anne of Green Gables is simpler than the rest of the series, but it's not nearly as like simply written as Betsy-Tacy.
Right. I mean, I feel like in some ways those first 4 Betsy-Tacy books are almost like early readers. Like the font is bigger even. Like they're written for a younger audience.
Yes. Yeah. And I just heard that the font, I think the font size is increased only for Betsy and Tacy Go Downtown, and then or decreased, and then decreased obviously for the older books.
Yeah.
So I guess, Meghan, how did you hear about these, and kind of what did you think they were going to be like before reading them?
Yeah, so I first heard about Betsy-Tacy through the read along that was done a couple years ago by Kate and Katie and Kelly. And I was like, how have I never heard of these books? Like, I love Anne of Green Gables, I love Little Women, I love Little House on the Prairie. Like, they're the stories I grew up with. They're like my soulmates. It was like, how have I never heard of Betsy-Tacy? And so I bought the whole series as soon as the read along was announced. I bought the whole series because I knew I would love them, and I did. And yeah, they did remind me of Anne of Green Gables, like you guys were saying, and Little Women and Little House. But they also reminded me of there's this old musical with Judy Garland called Meet Me in St. Louis. Yeah, it totally made me think of that, because they're like, they have this nicer house, and it's like the early 1900s, and it's like, I think Mankato was quite a bit smaller than St. Louis, but still, it was yeah, like it just had that same feeling, like lots of sisters in the family, and I really liked it. And I found that even though there's like less hardship in it, like in your interview that you did, Kate, with the board members from the society, that was so cool. They said, like, you know, there isn't as much like hardship or life and death stuff in Betsy-Tacy, but it's actually kind of nice. There are serious things in it, but it's kind of nice to just be like, all right, I know that nothing too tragic is going to happen. Like, my heart isn't going to get ripped out and stomped all over like what happens in some of these other books. And so it's really nice to just, it's really restful and really enjoyable. I just love them so much.
Excellent. Excellent. Yeah, I had forgotten. It really does feel like Meet Me in St. Louis. And that is, yeah, I feel conflicted about whether I actually want like movie adaptations of Betsy-Tacy, but I feel like kind of the next best thing is just Meet Me in St. Louis. So yeah, very, very fun.
I wouldn't be unopposed to it, just so that it could get some wider readership, because I feel like so many people, it's like that we've never heard of Betsy-Tacy before.
Yes. Yeah, I think even, I will say this, a silver lining to even if there was a really crummy adaptation is that the book sales would like go through the roof. It would really just put more awareness out there about them. So Rainey, we are currently rereading Betsy-Tacy, but 2019 was your first time reading through the series. And so how did you hear about it, and kind of what were your expectations going into it?
Well, I kind of like Meghan had just heard about it via basically the announcement video for your read along, and I was kind of the same way. I was like, how have I never heard about these before? Because I love Little House on the Prairie. Like, that has a special place in my heart. And I liked Anne of Green Gables, but at that point I hadn't read the whole series yet either. So like, but whenever somebody, I'm not sure who, said that it was like Little House on the Prairie, I'm like, well, yes, I need to read that. And where has that been all my life? and I also, whenever I saw somebody hold up probably you, hold up the pictures for the PS editions of the books. I thought they looked a lot like the American Girls Samantha covers, and I still have a Samantha American Girl, and I read like all the little books, and it's the same era. It's like the Edwardian era. So I was like, oh, perfect. This is my series. I need to read this. and I actually, and I remember you guys saying, you know, the beginning books are kind of, you know, less mature, you know, like, and that you age with them. But I kind of really enjoyed that. And whenever I first read the first books, I was like, oh, this is really cute, you know, and you can read them so quickly. And I just kind of liked getting that the little vignette style of it. So I really liked that part of it. And so other people might not have liked it as much, but yeah, I liked the younger part of the series, but I liked them all. But
I know there is a lot of debate amongst Betsy-Tacy fans about, the high school years versus the early years. But I do think there is a good segment of Betsy-Tacy fans. You're not alone that like really enjoy the early years, and some of them maybe even more than the high school years.
Yeah, I've even kind of debated that in myself of which I like better. Yeah, I had my expectations for it were whenever I saw the covers, I was just like, oh, this is like Samantha from American Girls, and I need that in my life.
That's interesting. I hadn't heard that avenue of appeal before, but that makes sense, especially for women our age, that that would be kind of the hook to pull you in.
Yeah. I have a coworker that used to get the American Girl magazines at work because he has a daughter that he was buying them for. And they would come to our office and be like, can I read this? Can I look at this? And but I was so disappointed because they don't have the historical American Girls as much anymore. They're all the newer ones.
Oh, I know.
I feel compelled to bring, she's sitting up on my top shelf and I'm like, I feel like she needs to be in the shot now.
That's so sweet.
Felicity and Kirsten are up there too, but
I
we're not talking about them right now.
Alrighty, I guess Naomi, would you like to talk about how you found out about the series and what you thought it would be like before reading it?
So I actually heard about it from Meghan. Somehow I missed the announcements, and then Meghan's like, have you heard about this series? Because she was already like halfway through book 2, and she's like, you'll love this. And so because I trust Meghan in all things children's classics, I was like, okay. So I jumped right on and started reading. I didn't buy them right away, but I got them from the library, aside from the last 3, which I bought on e-copy. And then by Betsy and Joe, I ordered them all from my bookstore. Like, I was just like, I'm hooked. I don't care. I need this book series in my life forever. But I don't know what I expected, because Meghan was just like, these are so cute and they're wonderful. So I was like, they'll be cute and wonderful. I didn't have any other expectations because I trust Meghan. And we have read so many books together over the years. She knows my taste so well that it works out perfectly. Yeah. Meghan convinced me to read it in not too many words, and I couldn't be more happy.
That is wonderful. Oh, it's so great to hear. It's really nice when you have a reader that you trust saying, read this book. That's like if Katie recommends a middle grade book, I'm like, oh, okay. Like I need to investigate this. And like Becky and Bethany have similar mystery taste to me. So I'm like, oh, okay. They like this. So yeah, I think word of mouth is a way that can help spread the news. But now after the interview I did with the society, and there was a story Jennifer had where she had a bumper sticker on her car that said, I'd rather be reading Betsy-Tacy, and she met a fan that way. So I'm like, I need to like just wear a big sweatshirt, like with it just on at all times. Just to be, as Katie likes to say, a book evangelist about this series. So then that leaves Becky and Bethany, and Becky was my roommate in college, and Bethany was a childhood friend, lifelong friend now of Becky's. So Becky, did you hear about the series from like my read along announcement? Is that how you heard about it?
So yes and no. You had mentioned the series to me before the read along, and I actually read the first book, but the illustrations and the very simplistic language kind of threw me. I wasn't charmed by the first book. But I realized I had actually heard of the series before because it's mentioned in the movie You've Got Mail. If anyone has ever seen it, there's a scene where Kathleen Kelly is standing in her bookshop when Joe Fox is there with his aunt and his brother. And she's going through the books and she's talking about this girl, Elizabeth, who goes by Betsy, and her friend Anastasia, who goes by Tacy, and then she brings up Tib. So
and she says, who I'm afraid her full name is Thelma.
Yes, I can never remember Tib's full name, but I know that she mentioned it in the movie. So I had read the initial book and kind of dismissed it. Katie's mind is blown. Yes, it's mentioned in You've Got Mail.
Sorry, can I just say too, I just read an article in like one of the Betsy-Tacy newsletters that it was down to a Betsy-Tacy fan. They were at a party and someone said, oh, I'm working on this romantic comedy with Meg Ryan and Tom Hanks. And the character, she's going to play this character who loves children's literature. And she's like, oh, let me tell you about Betsy-Tacy. And so she just kind of lost it when she was in the theater and sees it referenced in the movie and in the script.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, so I know. Can we do a watch party next, and we'll all just cheer when Betsy-Tacy is mentioned?
That's gonna be a watch along thing that Angie and I do. That's gonna be in my repertoire now.
Love that so much. That's the most charming story about that movie ever. Oh my gosh.
No.
Okay, so if I can say so myself, the story gets a little bit better. So
Okay.
I believe I read the first book in 2017. In 2018, one of my best friends was getting married, and her favorite movie is You've Got Mail. So we did a You've Got Mail bridal shower in a library for her. So the bridesmaids and I were like going through and like looking up all these references and trying to find, the librarian was trying to find books in the library that we could use for a display for her bridal shower. And so in doing that, it was kind of like, oh yeah, there's this Betsy-Tacy thing in the ballet shoes books that I haven't read. And I've read most of the other children's books that are mentioned in the series. So I spent all this time focusing on You've Got Mail for this shower. And then the next year when the announcement video came out, it was like, okay, Kate has talked about these. It's in this movie. I spent like half a year, I think not half a year, but like a few months, like diving into every little detail about this movie to do the shower. I didn't get the first book, but Kate is really good at winning people over. If Kate is excited about something, she will get you to be excited about it too. So I was like, if she's excited about it, I should really try this series again. And I'm so glad that I did, because I borrowed the first couple books from the library. And then I think the fourth or fifth book they didn't have the high school years. So then I started buying them just because if I wanted to read them, I had to buy them. And now I left a couple of them downstairs, but now I have the whole series because I enjoyed it so much. And like several of you have mentioned, I loved the Little House books and Anne of Green Gables and Pollyanna as a kid. And it kind of fits in the what I like to call the girlhood books, like Rebecca of Sunnybrook Farm or Pollyanna, or the books that kind of capture a coming of age in girlhood. Meghan, I think you said it reminds me of Meet Me in St. Louis. For some reason, it reminded me of Music Man, because that's another musical that's set around that time. Not so much the story, but the illustrations and the dresses, especially in the high school books, really reminded me of that. Yeah. And
mine is the Con Man. Betsy-Tacy plus Con Man equals Music Man.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, it was really enjoyable. And then that Thanksgiving of that year, I wasn't able to go home for Thanksgiving, so we spent it with friends, and our friend's granddaughter was there, and I saw this little Betsy-Tacy book, and I was like, have you started reading the Betsy-Tacy series? And she and I had this whole conversation, and I was just so excited that she knew about them, and I was really excited, and I kept telling her mom, I'm like, she's too little, but when she gets older, there are more, and she can grow into the series, which I think is part of the reason that makes the book so wonderful, is that you can read them when you're little, and then you can grow into them, and you don't grow out of the series. You can really grow into it. Which, Rainey, it looked as though you had a comment that you looked excited about something.
I was going to ask you a question. My best friend's daughter is 5. She's going to be 6 this year. When should I introduce her to this series?
This little girl was 6 or 7 at the time.
Okay.
She was a pretty motivated reader.
Okay.
So I know that 5 to 7 range, I feel like kids really vary in their reading desire and ability. So this girl was I think a pretty motivated reader. So I think it kind of depends on the kid, but she was about 6, I think. Okay. So no, and honestly, reading out loud is great too.
Yeah.
And there are illustrations in all of the books. So even if they're 5, even if you're just alternating reading out loud or trying to spot words that they recognize.
She was born on my birthday in May, so I might have to get her the first story for her 6th birthday this year.
Oh, that would be so great.
I think I got the set of 4 for my niece. She might have been about 5 maybe, and I think her mom read her the first couple.
Okay.
Yeah, my sister-in-law, and she loved it. I don't think she's moved on, but I think when she gets older she will.
Okay.
Yeah,
Cool.
I had a fun experience when my pastor's family came over for dinner, and I had this section of the kitchen that had some illustrations that I liked from different books. And the pastor's wife, Amanda, she called her daughter over. She's like, Mata, what is that picture from? And I was like, oh. And she's like, it's from Betsy-Tacy. You know Betsy-Tacy? And I was like, yes, I do. I knew I loved you already. I knew you were great.
Like when you find out you have a friend in common, you're like, you know them too?
Yes, you know Betsy. Yes. Oh,
I would have known you girls in college. We went to school so close to each other. I wish well, I'm older than you, but I feel like
older.
Yeah, I won't say places on here, but like Rainey, I can DM you later. I have a feeling you live extremely close to a family member of mine. Like very close.
Oh.
We can talk about it later. I don't want to put it on the internet, but
Yeah.
there's if I'm in your neck of the woods, I might DM you and we can like get coffee.
Okay, all right. That'd be fun.
And then that leaves Bethany. I'm assuming you heard about it from the read along. Is that how?
Actually, same way Becky did. You've Got Mail. My mom loved You've Got Mail, so we watched it all the time. And I remember her talking about Tib being, her name is Thelma, and the little girl, like, oh, that's such a shame, like her name's Thelma. And I remember thinking, I wonder what books those are, because a lot of the other books are more popular, you hear about them more often. And then I just didn't think about it when Kate brought up the readathon. She started talking about it. I'm like, that's those books from You've Got Mail. I was like, huh. Because up till then I was like, oh yeah, that sounds like something I could be interested in reading, but I hadn't really, it hadn't hooked me. I didn't have any expectations, like high or low. I was just kind of like, okay, girlish books, sounds a little old fashioned maybe, Betsy, you hear the name Betsy, you think, okay, it's older. So what should I be expecting here? Because a lot of times some of those older books, you'd get a lot of like moralizing or preaching, I don't know. And so, I read, I think it was called Beautiful Girlhood or something like that. Mm-hmm. It's a really old book about like how girls should behave. Hated it so much. And so with every book like set in the early 1900s, I'm like, what's this going to be like? And this blew it out of the water. Like these books were so, I don't know, ahead of their time, I guess is like the only way to put it, because it was just like, there was a lot of, we expect you to go to college, get an education. All these girls had different interests. They wanted to write or act or do duets or, like they had so many different interests. And it was like, I don't know, nobody ever was kind of talking down to them and telling them, oh, you need to be this, or this is exactly how a lady should act. I mean, they changed denominations. I don't know if I'm allowed to do like spoilers or whatever on this, but when 2 of the girls changed denominations, their dad was just like, yeah, it's, that's fine. And was so awesome with them. I don't know. It was just like, I was like, I did not know a book from this time period could be like this. It was amazing. I thought it was so almost like groundbreaking reading it. And just the way that going through, I was like looking through each of the books, not that I don't own them, but like looking through the synopsises of them. And I was like, Betsy grows in every single novel and learns like so much. And it's so good for a young reader. I'm like, how do we not like all have these books on our shelves? Like we all know Little House on the Prairie. We all know, Anne of Green Gables. And like these books just like show her growing, show her changing, show her encountering obstacles. And I was like, my daughter's definitely going to be reading these because they're just so inspiring. That's like the great way. They're understated, but once you get into them, you're like, oh my goodness, there's so much here. I don't know. I was like really impressed with them, I guess.
Bethany, you put that so beautifully. I really do hope you like pursue creative writing because I love when you talk about books. And I think there is one of the things is that there's just a lot of love, especially in the Ray family. And I love when, Betsy she kind of writing Penny Dreadful type things. Which I think Mary Elizabeth Braddon, she treads the line. She does characterization and plot so beautifully. But it seems like she's just kind of like, what dramatic things can I toss in here? And I love, like, there was a conversation between Jewel and Bob Ray, like, all right, you know what? We can see this is something that Betsy's interested in. How can we turn this into something good and productive and not, what is this trash that you're writing? And I just love, it's just like the most gracious conversation. They're like, we're going to give you money to go out to eat and you get to go to the library. One of the coolest moments.
Yeah.
So I guess then could we just kind of jump in with either things that you really loved about the series, or if you have a book that immediately you're like, this is my favorite book in the series.
Well, you talking about the library, like her going to the library and having her money and like, going to have her lunch and then going back to the library and taking out her books for the next week. Like, it was just so cozy. I was like, oh my goodness, I just want to be in that world where, walking down the quaint little streets and going and getting your book and talking with the librarian and like she when she interacts with Joe in the library too, that's really sweet. And just all the library related things are just like, oh my goodness, my heart is it just feels so heartwarming.
It does. It really does. Yeah, I love all the like book and story love within the series.
I think the reason that I love the younger novels is because they really show Betsy having such a vivid imagination and her storytelling skills developing. Because I feel like in the later books we don't really we know she's writing, but we don't really see the stories as much that she's writing. So I kind of like in the younger eras when she's being more playful and imaginative, and we get to really see that develop. And so like I like growing up with her, and I like seeing where she goes. But those early novels, especially rereading it now this time around, I'm like, oh, this is so nice that we really see where she started. And because I don't know if you appreciate it so much the first time you read it, because maybe when you first read it, you're just like, oh, these are so juvenile and they're just like, so easy to read and, maybe not memorable. But then, the second time you read them, you're like, oh, this is just, you're just seeing how her mind is developing.
That is true, because in the older books, you can get frustrated with like, Betsy, you are so bad at time management with like getting ready for the essay contest.
Every year. Every year in high school.
Isn't that so true to life? Like, isn't that how we are, like, all the way through our life? Like, why didn't I just get on the ball with this? Every time I end up doing the same thing. It just makes Betsy so relatable.
Totally.
I think that's one of the things I love about the later books. Bethany, as you were saying, so many other books from the era can feel really preachy or moralistic, or the protagonist does so many bad things and they have to learn, they make all of these mistakes. I love that Betsy and her friends are admirable characters that you can look up to, but they're still flawed, but their flaws don't have gigantic arrows pointing at them, but they're also consistent. Like, it's not Betsy learns her lesson immediately and then she never does that thing again. Like, no, she's still vain about her hair sometimes, and she still procrastinates, and sometimes she's exclusive when she doesn't realize that she is, and those other things are consistent with her character. But as she's growing, she's kind of learning one aspect of her weakness and overcoming that, but then finding a new aspect to that weakness and then learning how to overcome that. So she deals with the same issues, but is still maturing through them, which is just fantastic characterization. I get that they're, loosely based on real life, which I think also just makes them fabulous. But I think that's something that's really important to have in children's books and often isn't done well. It's done phenomenally in the Betsy-Tacy books, in my opinion.
Yeah, I totally agree. I feel like that's something that sticks out in my head too, is that these characters, they're not perfect, but they are still, I love the word that you chose. They're still admirable. They're still characters that you can look up to and imagine yourself being friends with. But their flaws make them more human and more realistic. And yeah. And I think that does set this book apart a little bit from other books from their time as well, because I remember reading Little Women and thinking how moralizing Little Women is occasionally. I still love Little Women, but it can be pretty preachy. And you never really feel preached at in Betsy-Tacy.
Yeah, she
I
sneaks
think I
the lesson
loved-
in there. Good.
I just think I loved how different all of the friend groups were and like all the people in the friend groups. I never mixed up anyone while reading the books. Like even the brothers or the sisters, they were all so different. And then especially with Betsy, Tacy, and Tibbs, they all had different aspirations. They all had different goals. And Betsy, because we're reading it through her eyes, she's like, Tibbs gonna be this famous actress, and Tacy's gonna do this and do that. And it's like, but they didn't have those ambitions. And so once she had to face that she doesn't get to decide if Tacy gets married or not and all these things, like that was really cool to see. But I loved how they were like, we're still best friends, even though we have different goals and different ideals and different things that we want in life. It was like, they're different people, but yet they're still best friends.
Yes. And then on a humorous note, I love how it makes me think of in Anne of Green Gables when Diana has her little boy and she says, at first I wanted a little girl and I was going to name her Anne, but now that I have, baby, is it Fred? Is that the baby's name?
Yeah, Fred.
I wouldn't trade him for a million Anns. And I love how in Betsy in the Great World, when she hears Tacy's having a baby, she gets a doll for Tacy's baby girl that she's going to have.
Oh, yeah.
And then she's just shocked to find out that it's going to be a boy, which that's when I found out I was expecting my first. I told my husband, I was like, it's so great. We're going to have a little girl. This is like, I just knew I was going to be a girl mom. And then the Lord had other plans.
That happened to me too, Kate.
Yeah, they've kind of got that same friendship dynamic going on as Anne and Diana. Like Betsy's Betsy is overtly imaginative, and same thing with Anne. And so then she just like goes with what she wants to do. And then like Diana follows Anne and Tacy follows Betsy. But then they've got the added dynamic of Tib, who's just like, why are we doing this, guys? I don't get it. And she's so practical and pragmatic. So funny. And they're like, Tib was just like that, That's okay that she said that. Tib was just like that.
Yeah, they loved her anyway.
And I love that when they're waiting to see the flying lady and how they're like, why aren't we going into the show now? So Betsy keeps like ribbing Tib and she's like, Betsy, why are you hitting me like that?
They're always like, Tib's our weird friend. And it's like, I think that's actually Betsy in this scenario.
I feel like I'm the Tib in every situation.
But you're loved that's
right. Love me
anyway. You are.
One of my favorite things that I think is it in the first 4 books where their Christmas tradition, Betsy and Tacy's Christmas tradition, where they go into town and they look in the shop windows and then they finish what do they do? They finish their day by going to.
Did they get an ornament?
An ornament? Yeah. Is that it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they window shop and they don't buy anything, but then they get them at the end.
Yeah.
Sweet.
It's cute.
I And then I guess what I do not enjoy Betsy and the Great World as much, but now I know, like now that I say that, maybe on this read, I'll enjoy it more because I just love the world of Deep Valley so much, but I know it's only one book, so it could feel like nice variety. Did you all enjoy getting to travel with Betsy?
I really liked traveling with Betsy because I've done trips like that when I was like around 17. I went to Italy and Greece, and so some of the same locations. And I had gone to Germany, not where they did the play. What is that? Oberammergau or
Oberammergau. Yeah.
Yeah, so I hadn't been there, but I had some of the same experiences of like just being in Italy as a young teenage girl. So like I totally related to some of what was happening in the book, and I was just like, this just makes me feel so happy. But I did miss Deep Valley. I agree. Like by the end of it, I was like, okay, when are we going back? This is good. But it did feel like two separate series. Like it didn't feel like the same story at all. That's for sure.
To me, it felt a little bit like in the Anne series, Windy Poplars, where so Betsy and Joe, like by the time Betsy and the Great World comes along, I want Betsy and Joe. And and you don't get that at all. I think until the end of the book, right? When they kind of reconnect.
I don't even think they do in that book, do they?
Does it not happen? I thought it happened
when she gets
telegram at the very end that made me cry.
Yeah.
So
at the very end. So I did like that at the very end, but yeah, it doesn't happen until the very end of the book. And I feel like that's a little bit like Windy Poplars, where it's like this book that's in between two. You don't get any Gilbert, you don't get any Anne and Gilbert, really. I mean, the whole book is Anne writing to Gilbert, but you don't get Anne and Gilbert. Anyway, I want Betsy and Joe, and I wanted anyway.
Yes. Yeah.
I liked the travel, but I missed Great Valley. I missed the friendships that she has, and I missed Joe.
Yeah.
That's what I have to say. I've just always been so enamored of Joe Willard. And I think she did a really great job because I don't know. I don't remember like when I read the bios or whatever, but I was really shocked to see that like they didn't meet in high school. They weren't classmates, and they met as young professionals. But I love that, she didn't decide to have her, not meet him until after high school. I love that he was part of that. He's kind of on the fringes, he's not, because he's grown up faster than the rest of them. And I love that he can be a little bit rough around the edges. And I think he's just very guarded. And I love him all the more for it because it makes him Joe Willard.
I think I loved the experience of Betsy without Tacy in a way. Like I love her and Tacy as a duo, like, and Tip as a trio, because when Tip's not away. But I think it was interesting to see Betsy on her own and like have to make friends that weren't familiar, and she didn't have this comfort of falling back on. So to have her be completely on her own and traveling, and yes, she had these chaperones who knew her, but she also didn't have these friends that she could be like, oh, the gang's all here. Like she had to like go out and find her own new friends. I thought that was really great to see. But at the same time, it was like, I did miss those friendships, those core friendships and people that were tied to Betsy. And then the whole build up as like, I'm a history nerd. So seeing that year and I'm like, oh my goodness, this is building up to World War I. When's this going to hit? And I was like, she's stuck in Europe. So I was more on that mindset of she's in Europe, she's in Germany, this is happening. And I wasn't really focused on get back to Deep Valley. I was like, get out of Europe. That was my more
And I didn't even think about that till the end of the book.
I know, I didn't either.
Oh no, I was with you, Naomi. I was like, oh, why are you here? Go back, leave,
go away.
Go away. Yeah.
God, it was
This
so
was not the time.
Yeah, and how it ended with like knowing that the boys were all gonna go off to fight. It was like that was so sad. But it was also, like I wonder, like Naomi and I are Canadian. So like in my mind, oh, the war began for everyone in 1914, but it's like, oh no, No, not for you Americans. It began in 1917 for
We
you.
like to show up late.
Yes. Really?
But that is one thing I found comforting is I actually like Googled, Tib's husband, Tacy's husband, and Betsy's husband, and they were all okay after serving in the war. So I'm like, wow, this series really is like safe to read. These husbands that went off to war, they all made it back safely. But that's what also I think. As of now, I would say that Betsy's wedding is my favorite because you get so much Joe time, and you see what a friendship and a partnership he has with Betsy, and you get to see them kind of being these young adults together. So it's getting to see this new and different side to Betsy.
Yeah.
Piggybacking off of something you said, Naomi, about Tib coming in and out, I really appreciated that aspect of the books too, because friendships do change throughout life, and you have people that come in and out of your life or maybe leave for a little bit and then they come back, and you're kind of figuring out, are you the same person? Am I the same person? Can we still be friends? So I love that while we call them the Betsy-Tacy books, the crowd really grows and shifts and changes and brings more people in. And the friendships change. It's not just, we have this one little clique and it's just us and the books are about these three girls. I love that it really expands, and you get to see more people and see how within the group, how some of those friendship dynamics shift. Because I think that's also very true to life.
That is a good point, especially in adolescence. The whole thing with Tony, all of the drama with Tony. It's also a very frustrating thing because just seeing, I just am like the whole like, who will she go to this dance with? Will it be Joe or will it be Tony? Is really frustrating. But you can see how like they're if you have this guy who you're genuinely a good friend, like, well, I don't want to hurt his feelings. And so she's kind of just doing the best that she can navigating that. And it does seem really kind of like something that would actually happen.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I liked seeing Tib's story too, because it was a little bit, it was pretty relatable, I thought. Just her, because then at one point, and we haven't gotten to this part in the reread, so I could be like totally off base, but didn't she get involved with somebody that wasn't, like, he was kind of a
jerk?
Yeah. Okay. All right. I'm remembering correctly.
Yes. Is his name Rocky? Is that what he goes by? Or is that another
Rocky? Oh, yes. Yeah, I remember. Okay. I remember her getting involved with somebody that's like, no. The whole time I was like, get rid of him, Tim. You're too good for him.
Yeah, that's right.
And he belittles her interests, and immediately I'm like, red flag.
Oh gosh. But yeah, it's so relatable. And I feel like, a lot of, like Bethany was saying, in that era, you don't really get a lot of that. Like, you just get more preached at. And I feel like in this series, you get a lot of relatable instances, like, oh yeah, girls did like get involved with men that, well, obviously we know women got involved with men who thought that they were less than them, but but Tib's reaction to it was different than a lot of women, and you just got to see that progression with her. So I liked that even though she was kind of a side character, the more the series went on, that she still, had a really good character arc, I guess you would call it. And it wasn't just fluffy,
Yes.
It was like a real thing.
Yeah. And that is also sweet how they finally get to be each other's bridesmaids for Tib's wedding.
Yeah.
And then Emily of Deep Valley, I read for the first time in 2019. So, I'm wondering, did you all enjoy it? And did you enjoy it as much as the series? Because it does have a different vibe to it. Yeah, what did you think of it?
I loved it.
Mhm.
I loved Emily of Deep Valley. I loved it because, so I love the sweetness and the wholesomeness. I mean, it is still sweet and wholesome, but like there's more obstacles that she faces, and I really appreciated that in Emily of Deep Valley. I really appreciated that she really had to work hard to kind of overcome her circumstances. You know, she came from, I mean, I don't think the Rays were wealthy, but they were certainly solidly middle class. They never had to worry about anything. And Emily did. And I think that, and I really appreciated that she just had to struggle a little harder to, I appreciated her struggle, her tenacity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, I really liked, that was probably one of my favorites in the series actually. And it was like the last one I think that we read for your read along. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is the best one in the whole series. And yeah, just for that very reason, it was just like, I don't know, it was just grittier or something. Like, not that any of her books were gritty, but there was way more at stake, I guess, for Emily than for any. But I appreciate that with the whole series, that there was always something in every book that was like real. It was really hard. Like, no matter if you're middle class or low class or whatever, there was something that really was pretty traumatic that happened for most, if not all, of the books.
Mhm.
Maybe it was only one chapter, but it was there, so I liked that, definitely in Emily, that it was pretty much a whole book of like her struggling, but in the whole series, it's like she didn't just put on this rose tinted glasses for the whole series. Like, she was like, hey, we might be middle class, but things are still happening.
It never felt like a slog in Emily. Like, it never felt like, oh,
Right.
like it still had the same sort of wholesome sweetness as the rest of the series. It was just, she just faced a little bit more, but and I'm not denigrating the other books, because there's nothing wrong with the fact that, the problems faced in the other books were just more like, they're just more, I don't know, they're just more, I mean, it
Surface
certainly
level?
felt more relatable to like the life that I led. I mean,
Mhm.
other than the time period, but like, it's not like there was a lot of drama other than regular sort of teenage drama. But
I feel like the ratio of problem is higher in Emily of Deep Valley, kind of like
Yeah.
the scale. It's
Yeah.
like very grown up
Mhm.
problems that she's having.
yeah,
I like
that
too
it
that
was,
she. Oh, go ahead, Naomi.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I found that it was it focused a lot on the difference of outcomes, like the different kind of outcomes you can have with your life. And I really liked how, so in like the Betsy books, it's like, go to college, do this, do that. And it was like, that's really great. And at the same time, Emily was about like, there's value in, taking care of your loved ones and staying home. And I felt like in a way it was like, okay, we showed the value of going to college and going to get an education and doing all of these things, but at the same time, we're showing the value of, the other side of the coin, of what other people have to do. And it's not degrading that side either. And I also found that I really loved her finding her contentment in that, like her struggle to find that the value, like where's her purpose in staying home. And then when she was able to find her purpose and able to be like, use her time there. And it was like, actually, she had did so much more with her time than if she had gone to college and all of these things. It was like, I really just loved how it showed her growth. Even just one book, I felt like I knew Emily so much, as much as I knew Betsy after like 10 books. Like, I don't know. I just loved Emily's arc, even though it was over one short book.
really, that's really good. I really appreciate those words.
Yeah.
That was really well.
Yeah, I
And-
really like how, oh, sorry, you go.
No, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I really like how, like, I love the Betsy-Tacy series, but there were a couple moments when I was like, oh man, like Betsy is popular, you know, all her friends love her, all the boys love her. Like, does she have like any social problems? And of course she does. That's what the books are about. But
Well,
then
Meghan, her hair is not naturally curly.
oh, my goodness. the ultimate problem. Yeah, and that is her ultimate problem, is not having curly hair. And
I feel her.
Whereas Emily, she's dealing with being left behind. Like she, you know, everybody else goes off to college and she's left behind and she has to make new friends, and she doesn't have siblings or parents. Like so it is refreshing after you've read all the books to be like, man, everybody loves Betsy. And then you read a book and you're like, Emily's awesome too, even if she isn't as popular. So yeah.
Yes.
Well, I was just going to say, I love that we read the Betsy books first, and then we read the Emily book that's set in the same universe, but you really, from what I recall, you are not introduced to her, or if she is, she's an extremely side character. But I don't think we're introduced to her in the original series, are we?
Oh, to Emily, no.
To Emily.
No.
I know that some of Betsy and her friends have kind of like little cameos in the Emily book. So what I appreciated was that they were in the same universe, so that you kind of saw the other side of Deep Valley, and you're like, wow, this girl was living in Betsy-Tacy's world and was kind of a side character and had a completely different experience. I don't know. It made me think a lot more about how people can be living in the same community and have not only have different experiences, but one may overlook another. So I think it's great when you can read them parallel to see how different their worlds are while physically living in close proximity. And also just, I don't know.
Yeah, and kind of like you never know what someone is going through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because she's not mentioned in the other books, and then she has her own book and she kind of appears, and it's like, well, why didn't I know about her? It felt, for me, it felt less like a spin-off and more of just an expanding the world. Like, oh, there's even more in Deep Valley that I didn't see and Betsy didn't see, which again, I feel kind of plays into Betsy having her faults. I might be reading way too much into it, but Betsy having her faults, but them not being bashed over the head with them.
Yes.
But I don't know, while reading the Emily books, I kind of felt like you got a little bit of that, oh yeah, like she wasn't really in the in crowd, and she was, she didn't have a lot of people her age or a little bit older to, be super close with. So I thought it made a nice parallel.
Well, this has been just the most lovely thing. It's like a dream come true to get to just chat with a bunch of Betsy-Tacy fans. And I did, I realize now I really like talked up big game, especially to Katie and Meghan, comparing it to Anne of Green Gables, the like mecca of children's series. So I'm just really glad that, it has been welcomed into your canon of, beloved series out there. So yes, just putting more Betsy-Tacy content out there into the bookternet. And hopefully people will continue to hear about it. And I think the PS editions that came out in 2011, they are steadily selling each year. So hopefully,
is that what you learned? And I still haven't watched the Betsy-Tacy.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's where, now I've been like taking in a lot of content about it. So I'm not sure if they talked about it there. But one thing they did say when I said, why do you think they aren't heard about as much? Jamil, he said, well, I think Minnesotans are kind of a quiet people.
Just like a music fan in Iowa.
And then they were talking about that the Tibbs house is not a museum. There's a family that lives there, and they tell people you're welcome to come take a picture in front of the house. And if it's tourists, they'll do it. But if it's Minnesotans, they have to tell them 2 or 3 times, like, you really can come take a picture. Oh, and I learned also Tibbs' father, like the house that they live in, Tibbs' father designed the house. He was an architect. And so he designed the house that they lived in.
Oh,
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
The chocolate colored house.
chocolate colored house.
All righty. Well, thank you so much, ladies. And yes, I hope everyone who watched this enjoyed. And I will link all the booktubers channels down below.